The Rise of the Teletrons. The Rise of the Teletrons. Chapter 1. The Barren Prize. The station hung in the void like a jagged shard of silver, its hull patched with human welds and streaked with Zyran alloy that shimmered faintly in the starlight. It orbited low over the new world, a dusty, pale sphere pocked with stunted trees, no taller than a toddler, their brittle branches clawing at a thin sky. Tiny bugs skittered in the dirt, the only pulse of life on a rock that promised nothing and everything. Dr. Lena Voss stood at the observation deck, her breath fogging the reinforced glass, her dark hair pulled tight against her scalp. She adjusted her headset, the comms crackling faintly with static from the team waiting below decks. This was it, their shot. Earth was dying, its air thick with ash, its cities sinking under their own weight. This barren speck was a lifeline, and she'd be damned if the Zyrans took it without a fight. She turned, boots echoing on the cold steel floor, and strode down the corridor toward the negotiation chamber. The station was a Frankenstein's monster of design. Human bulkheads bolted together with raw utility, Zyran curves of translucent metal pulsing with a soft, alien glow. Vents hissed overhead, pumping recycled air that smelled of ozone and sweat. A Zyran panel flickered as she passed, its surface rippling like water. A security scan, probably, though she'd never cracked how their tech worked. Her stomach churned. She'd faced hostile boards before, grant committees, military brass. But this was different. This was first contact turned turf war, and the stakes were planetary. The chamber doors slid open with a hiss, revealing a room that felt like two worlds colliding. A steel table anchored the human side, scratched and utilitarian, flanked by datapads and coffee-stained mugs. Across from it, a Zyran platform curved upward, its surface smooth and luminous, reflecting the cold overhead lights. The air buzzed with voices, human shouts overlapping with the low, resonant hum of Zyran speech, translators struggling to keep up. At the center stood the Zyran delegation, and Lena froze mid-step, taking them in. They were humanoid, but only just. Tall, 7 feet at minimum, some pushing 8. Their frames were impossibly thin, like reeds stretched to breaking. Yet they moved with a quiet strength, a grace that hinted at power coiled tight. Their skin shimmered pearlescent white, a sheen that caught the light, and threw it back in soft waves, while bioluminescent patterns, swirls, jagged lines, spirals, pulsed across their bodies like living art. Their heads were oversized, bald, and smooth, housing minds Lena knew could outthink her in seconds. Their leader stepped forward, his black eyes locking on her, unblinking. The humans had dubbed him Kael, his real name a ripple of sound like water over stones, unpronounceable without gills. His patterns glowed a faint amber, steady and calm, as he planted his long legs and faced her. "This world is ours," Kael said, his voice a low hum through Lena's translator, each word vibrating with an alien weight. His fingers flexed, long, delicate-looking, but strong enough to crush steel, she'd bet. Zyran ships charted it first. Our probes sank into its crust, tasted its air. We claim it. Lena squared her shoulders, her boots clanging on the deck. Earth satellites flagged it months ago, she shot back, her voice sharp against his resonance. We've got people dying, lungs blackening, cities drowning in trash. You don't get dibs just because you're taller. A ripple of green flickered across Kael's skin. Irritation, maybe, or something sharper. The other Zyrans shifted behind him, their patterns sinking in a brief flash of light, a silent conference no human could pierce. Lena's team flanked her at the table, Dr. Sanjay Patel, a wiry biologist with a perpetual frown, tapping nervously at his pad. Captain Maria Ortiz, a grizzled soldier with scars crisscrossing her knuckles, her hand twitching toward a holster she wasn't wearing, and half a dozen techs clutching datapads like lifelines. The new world wasn't much. Probes showed a thin atmosphere, rocky soil, bugs no bigger than grains of sand. But it was a blank slate. Earth's colonies needed it to breathe. Zyra, from the scraps Lena had pieced together, was losing its oceans to some slow, creeping rot. Neither side could walk away. Ortiz leaned forward, her scarred hand slapping the table with a clang. "We've got ships prepped to land," she growled, her voice rough as gravel. "Troops, supplies, ready to stake it. You want to test us, glowstick?" Kael's head tilted, his patterns deepening to a forest green. "Your weapons are loud," he said, voice steady as stone. "Ours are patient. We could erode your fleet to dust while you sleep, grind your bones to sand over centuries. But war profits no one." Lena shot Ortiz a glare. "Shut up, Maria," then faced Kael, her jaw tight. "So, what's your play? Stalemate until the planet's a fossil? We wait each other out while our people choke?" The Zyran paused, his big head gleaming under the lights. His patterns softened to a thoughtful violet, and he tapped the table with a glowing finger. A hologram flared to life above the steel. The new world, spinning slowly, its surface overlaid with spiraling strands. Human DNA, blocky and rugged, twisting into Zyran DNA, sleek and luminous, merging into something new. "No," Kael said, his voice a ripple of certainty. "We propose a merge. Blend our ecosystems, share the prize." The room went dead silent, the hum of the station's vents the only sound. Lena blinked at the hologram, the double helix pulsing like a heartbeat, its strands shimmering with possibility. Patel coughed, leaning closer, his frown deepening as he squinted at the projection. "He's serious," he whispered, voice low enough for only Lena to hear. "They've got the tech, gene splicers, biolabs. We saw their specs when they docked. It's wild, but it's real." "Hybrids?" Lena said aloud, her voice cutting the stillness like a blade. She crossed her arms, staring at Kael's glowing form. "You want to play God together?" Kael's patterns flared blue, firm, resolute, a beacon in the dim. "Not gods," he said. "Makers. Your resilience, your stubborn roots in stone, our adaptability, our light in the void. Together, they could make this world great." Ortiz snorted, loud and harsh. "Great for who? Your freaky bugs crawling over our dirt? I'd rather bomb it than share it with glowworms." A Zyran behind Kael, shorter, wirier, with jagged patterns, glowed red briefly, a flash of anger. But Kael raised a hand, silencing them with a flicker of violet. "For both," he said, his voice unwavering. "Your species clings to life, fights through ash and ruin. Ours bends it, shapes it like water through cracks. Alone, we claim half a world. Bleed for it, die for it. Together, we build a whole one, stronger than either." Lena chewed her lip, glancing at her team. Patel was already tapping his pad, muttering about gene compatibility, his frown easing into something like curiosity. Ortiz scowled, but her hand eased off the table, her fight draining into grudging silence. The techs exchanged wide-eyed looks. One, a young woman with cropped hair, whispered, "It's insane, but it might work." It was insane, mashing. Earth's messy, scrappy life with Zyra's sleek, glowing strangeness, creating hybrids to colonize a rock neither could fully take. But it wasn't war. It wasn't surrender. It was something else. "Why?" Lena asked, locking eyes with Kael's unblinking stare. "Why share when you could fight? Your ships could outlast us. Your patience could bury us. Why this?" His patterns slowed, a gentle violet washing over his pearlescent skin like a tide. "Wisdom," he said, the word heavy with age. "Strength is in difference, not division. Zyra learned this when our seas began to fade, when we fought the tides and lost, then shaped them and lived. Your people." Lena's mind flashed to earth. Smoke-choked skies over crumbling towers, children coughing in sealed domes, oceans swallowing coastlines inch by inch. "Survival," she said, her voice quieter than she meant it to be. "We've got no choice. We adapt or we die." The silence stretched, thick and heavy, the holograms spinning between them. Patel cleared his throat, his voice cutting through like a lifeline. "It's doable," he said, louder now, holding up his pad. "Their sequencers are light years ahead, literally. Pair them with our databases, our field data. We could start small. Bacteria, maybe. Test the concept." Ortiz grunted, crossing her arms. "And if it flops? If their bugs eat ours, and we're left with glowing sludge?" "Then we're no worse off," Lena snapped, her patience fraying. "We're already losing. Earth's on its knees, and they're not much better." She jerked her head at the Zyrans, their patterns flickering in unison, watching, waiting. "This isn't a win. It's a chance." Ortiz muttered something under her breath, probably a curse, but didn't argue. Patel nodded, his fingers still dancing over his pad. The text shifted, a murmur of agreement rippling through them. Lena turned back to Kael, studying him, his towering frame, his glowing skin, the quiet strength in his thin limbs. The Zyrans were wise, no question. Those big heads held centuries of knowledge humans could only guess at. But they were strong too, in ways Earth's blunt force couldn't match. Maybe that was the point. Maybe their differences could work, not just to survive, but to build something new. She took a breath, steadying herself, and extended her hand, palm up across the table. "Deal," she said, her voice firm despite the thud of her heart. "But we go step by step. No rushing, no leaps. We test it. Small, controlled. Agreed?" Kael's patterns flared blue again, bright and steady, a glow that lit the room like a promise. He stepped forward, his long legs closing the distance in one fluid motion, and his hand, warm, pulsing faintly with light, closed around hers. His grip was firm, alien, alive, the strength in his thin fingers undeniable. "Step by step," he echoed, his voice a ripple through her translator, a vow sealed in sound and light. The hologram pulsed once more, then faded. Around them, the station hummed, human steel and Zyran alloy, holding steady, the new world waiting below. Lena pulled her hand back, flexing her fingers, the warmth of Kael's touch lingering. Ortiz grumbled, Patel scribbled, and the Zyrans glowed in quiet unison. It was done. The merge had begun. Chapter 2. First sparks. The lab was a cocoon of glass and steel, nestled deep in the orbiting station's belly, its walls humming with the faint vibration of engines keeping them aloft. Beyond the reinforced viewport, the new world spun silently, its dusty surface dotted with stunted trees, its thin air shimmering in the starlight. Inside, the air was sharp with ozone and antiseptic, a sterile bubble where human and Zyran hands worked in uneasy tandem. Dr. Lena Voss stood at the central console, her dark hair escaping its tie as she adjusted her headset, her fingers hovering over a touchscreen smudged with human prints. Beside her loomed Kael, his pearlescent skin casting a soft glow on the sleek equipment, his bioluminescent patterns pulsing a steady amber. Focus, she'd learned after a week of decoding his alien moods. The chamber buzzed with activity. Human techs in stained jumpsuits darted between stations, hauling crates of Earth samples, while Zyran scientists glided silently, their tall, skinny frames bending over glowing panels of their own design. The Zyran tech was a marvel, curved, translucent, pulsing faintly like their skin, while the human gear was blocky, patched, and loud, whirring with overworked fans. A tangle of cables snaked across the floor, bridging the gap between species, and Lena couldn't shake the feeling that this was less a lab and more a battlefield, each side testing the other's mettle. "Earth bacteria first," Lena said, her voice cutting through the hum. She slid a vial of soil microbes into the sequencer, a rugged little beast harvested from Earth's dying plains, stubborn as hell. "Basic, resilient, your move." Kael's big head tilted, his black eyes glinting like polished stones. With a long, strong finger, he tapped a Zyran pod, a sleek orb of alloy that hissed open, releasing a shimmering cloud of microbes. They glowed faintly, tiny embers drifting in the sterile air, and Lena squinted as they caught the light. Hours cycle fast, Kael hummed through her translator, his voice a ripple of calm. They thrive in void, feed on starlight. Your roots, our wings. The sequencer whirred, a low growl rising from its guts as it chewed through the samples. A holoscreen flickered to life above the console, projecting DNA strands, Earth's blocky, rugged helix twisting into Zyran's sleek, luminous spiral, merging into something jagged and new. A robotic arm clicked, injecting the hybrid mix into a petri dish sealed under a glass dome. Lena crossed her arms, her skepticism a shield. If this flops, we're back to square one, she said, glancing at Kael. No planet, no merge, just a lot of wasted time. Kael's patterns shifted to violet. Confidence, maybe a touch of defiance. Watch, he said, his voice a quiet command. The lab settled into a tense rhythm, the hours ticking by as the station traced its slow orbit. Lena paced, her boots scuffing the floor, her mind racing with what-ifs. Earth's brass wouldn't wait forever, and Ortiz was probably sharpening her knives in the barracks. Kael stood still, a glowing statue, his pattern steady as the dish sat under its dome. Human techs muttered over coffee, their screens flashing baseline data. Growth rates, cell division, nothing special yet. Zyran scientists hummed in low unison, their skinny arms adjusting sensors with a precision that made Lena's skin crawl. They were wise, these aliens, centuries of knowledge packed into those big heads. But their strength was in the details, the patience she'd never mastered. Dr. Sanjay Patel broke the silence, his wiry frame hunched over a scope. Growth spike! He shouted, his voice cracking with excitement. The lab snapped to attention, head swiveling as Patel tapped his pad, projecting the dish's feed overhead. Lena pushed through the crowd, Kael gliding beside her, his glow brightening the glass. Inside the dish, the hybrid bacteria weren't just growing, they were exploding, doubling every few minutes, a pace that shredded Earth's records. Pinpricks of light bloomed across the culture, faint at first, then pulsing in unison, a miniature galaxy trapped in a smear of gel. It's glowing, Lena breathed, leaning closer, her reflection warping in the dome. The light wasn't random. It mimicked Kael's patterns, swirls and jagged lines shifting as if alive. She turned to him, her pulse quickening. Is it supposed to do that? Kael's thin frame bent toward the dish, his black eyes narrowing. More than glow, he said, his voice low and resonant. Look closer! Patel adjusted the scope, zooming in until the holoscreen showed individual cells. Tiny, jagged shapes clumping together, not spreading aimlessly like bacteria should. Patterns, Patel muttered, his frown melting into awe. They're organizing, forming clusters, deliberate ones. Intelligence? Lena asked, her voice sharp, almost accusing. From bacteria? That's impossible. Not thought, Kael said, his patterns flaring brighter, a cascade of violet and blue. Instinct, amplified. Your endurance holds them steady. Our speed pushes them forward. Together, they reach. The dish flared again, a sudden brilliant pulse of light that made the humans flinch and the Zyrans hum louder, their skin sinking with the glow in a chorus of approval. Lena stared, her heart thudding against her ribs. This wasn't just a test succeeding. It was a spark, a wild living proof that their differences could ignite something beyond either species. The clusters pulsed again, tighter now, their light shifting in waves like a signal, a heartbeat, a question. Holy hell, Patel said, his pad trembling in his hands. It's rewriting the rulebook. Growth rates off the charts, 10 times Earth's best. And the clustering, it's not random. It's like they're talking. Talking? Ortiz's voice cut in, rough and skeptical. She'd slipped into the lab unnoticed, her scarred hands on her hips, her eyes narrowed at the dish. It's bacteria, not a damn diplomat. What's the catch? No catch, Kael said, straightening to his full height, his patterns steadying to amber. Only potential. Your roots anchor, our light lifts. This is the first step. Lena ignored Ortiz, her mind racing. Scale it, she said, turning to Patel. Run the numbers. How far can this go? Plants? Insects? She glanced at Kael. You said step by step. This is step 1. What's 2? Kael's finger tapped the console, locking the data with a flicker of light. Life builds on life, he said. Next, we weave more. Your ants are flyers. Small, but strong. The lab buzzed again, human techs scrambling to log the results, Zyrans gliding to their panels with a quiet grace. Lena stepped back, her breath steadying, the glow of the dish still burning in her vision. It was a spark, small, fragile, but alive. And it was theirs. Chapter 3. Tiny Empires. The lab had transformed in the week since the bacteria flared to life, its sterile cocoon now a chaotic hive of its own. Cables snaked thicker across the floor, bridging human terminals, blocky, whirring beasts patched with duct tape, to Zyran panels that pulsed with a soft, alien glow. Beyond the viewport, the new world spun unchanged. Dusty, barren, its stunted trees casting faint shadows under a weak sun. Inside, the air thrummed with tension and coffee fumes, human techs darting between stations, while Zyran scientists glided, their tall, skinny frames bending over equipment with a grace that made Dr. Lena Voss's skin prickle. She stood at the central console, her headset askew, her dark hair a mess from sleepless nights. Beside her loomed Kael, his pearlescent skin shimmering, his bioluminescent patterns a steady amber. Focus unbroken. The bacteria's success had lit a fire under the team, human and Zyran alike. The petri dish still sat under its dome, its glowing clusters pulsing like a heartbeat, a constant reminder of what they'd sparked. Lena's fingers tapped the console, pulling up the next phase, ants and bees, small but tough, the backbone of any ecosystem. She glanced at Kael, his big head tilted slightly, his black eyes glinting. Your bacteria held up, she said, her voice rough from too little sleep. Let's see if your bugs can match ours. Kael's patterns shifted to violet, confidence with a flicker of challenge. He tapped a Zyran pod, its surface hissing open to reveal a swarm of tiny flyers, skinny, strong, their wings shimmering with a faint glow. Ours carve the air, he hummed through her translator, his voice a ripple of calm. They build in void, swift and wise. Lena slid an earth vial into the sequencer. Ants from a desert colony, scrappy survivors that had outlasted drought and heat. Ours dig deep, she said. Tough as nails. Let's mash 'em. The sequencer growled to life, its screen flashing DNA strands. Earth's rugged helix twisting into Zyran's luminous spiral, merging into something sharp and new. A robotic arm whirred, injecting the ant hybrid. Into a terrarium, a sealed box of dirt and rock under harsh lights. Beside it, a second arm loaded the bee mix into a glass hive, its walls etched with human scratches and Zyran runes. Lena crossed her arms, her skepticism a familiar shield. If they just eat each other, we're back to glowing sludge, she said. Step 2, better impress. Kael's patterns flared blue, assurance. They will weave, he said. Watch. The first hours were slow, the terrarium and hive quiet under the lab's hum. Lena paced, her boots scuffing the floor, while Kael stood still, his glow a beacon in the dim. Human techs, Sanjay Patel among them, huddled over screens, muttering about baseline growth, while Zyrans adjusted sensors with long, strong fingers. Ortiz prowled the edges, her scarred hands flexing, her presence a reminder of the stakes. Earth's brass wanted results, not experiments. The new world waited below, barren but watching. Then Patel jolted upright, his wiry frame trembling. Ants are moving, he shouted. tapping his pad to project the terrarium feed overhead. Lena shoved through the crowd, Kael gliding beside her, his patterns brightening. Inside, the hybrid ants weren't just digging, they were building. Tunnels spiraled through the dirt, precise and deep, their walls smoothed by tiny, glowing claws. The ants themselves shimmered, Earth's stocky bodies stretched into Zyran thinness, their exoskeletons flecked with bioluminescent streaks. They moved in lockstep, hundreds strong, carving a network that looked too deliberate for instinct. Hierarchy, Patel breathed, zooming in. Look, soldiers, workers, a queen. They're organizing fast, way beyond Earth ants. Lena squinted at the screen, her pulse quickening. The queen's chamber was a dome, its walls etched with crude shapes, lines, curves, dots, like hieroglyphs scratched in haste. What the hell are those? She asked, pointing. Decoration? Kael bent closer, his long finger tracing a glyph on the holoscreen, his patterns pulsing violet. Not decoration, he said. Order, they map. Where they've been, where they go, our wisdom, your strength. The lab buzzed, human gasps mixing with Zyran hums. Ortiz snorted, leaning against a wall. Great, glowing graffiti ants. What's next? They write us a treaty? Before Lena could snap back, a tech shouted, Bees! The hive feed flared overhead, drowning the ant image. Inside, the hybrid bees, Earth's chunky buzzers fused with Zyran flyers, weren't just building a hive. They'd crafted a glowing labyrinth, its walls hexagonal but sharper, pulsing with a faint light that echoed Kael's skin. The bees darted in patterns, their wings shimmering, their buzz a low rhythmic hum that felt intentional. They're sinking, Patel said, his pad trembling. The buzz, it's not random, it's like communication. And the hive, look at the precision, it's beyond anything natural. Lena stared, her breath catching. The hive's glow shifted, swirls and lines rippling across its surface, mirroring the ants' glyphs. The bees landed, their tiny bodies pulsing in unison, a dance of light and sound. Talking? She asked, her voice sharp. Bugs don't talk. Not words, Kael said, his patterns flaring blue and violet. Signals. Your tenacity holds the hive. Our speed shapes it. Together, they speak. The hive flared brighter, a sudden pulse that made the humans flinch. Zyrans hummed louder, their skin sinking with the glow, a chorus of awe. Lena's mind raced. The ants' tunnels, the bees' hive, both tiny empires rising from dirt and air. This wasn't just survival, it was creation, a step beyond anything Earth or Zyra could muster alone. Scale it, she said, turning to Patel. Log everything, glyphs, buzz patterns, growth rates. We need to know how far this goes. She faced Kael, her jaw tight. You said weave more. What's next? Plants. Birds. Kael's finger tapped the console, locking the data with a flicker of light. Life grows on life, he said, his voice a ripple of certainty. Next, your blooms, our flutters. Small empires lead to vast ones. The lab erupted. Techs scrambling, Zyrans gliding, Ortiz muttering about damn glowing bugs. Lena stepped back, the twin glows of terrarium and hive burning in her vision. These weren't just hybrids. They were proof, tiny and fierce, that differences could build something great. And they were only beginning. Chapter 4. Bloom and Flutter. The lab had become a jungle of its own, a tangle of human and Zyran tech sprawling across the station's core. Cables draped like vines between clunky Earth terminals and Zyran panels that pulsed with a soft, alien glow, their light bouncing off glass walls streaked with condensation. Beyond the viewport, the New World hung unchanged, its dusty plains and stunted trees, a blank canvas under a thin gray sky. Inside, the air buzzed with static and the sharp tang of soil, a living hum that hadn't existed a week ago. Dr. Lena Voss stood at the central console, her headset dangling around her neck, her dark hair a wild halo from days of relentless work. Beside her loomed Kael, his pearlescent skin shimmering, his bioluminescent patterns a steady amber, focus unbroken despite the chaos. The ants and bees had set the bar high. Their terrarium and hive sat at the lab's edge, glowing faintly, the ants' tunnels spiraling with hieroglyphs, the bees' hive pulsing with rhythmic buzzes. They were tiny empires, proof that Earth's grit and Zyra's wisdom could weave something extraordinary. Lena's fingers danced over the console, pulling up the next phase, plants and insects, the next thread in the tapestry. She glanced at Kael, his big head tilted, his black eyes glinting like polished obsidian. "Your bug's impressed," she said, her voice rough but edged with a grin. "Let's see if your flowers can keep up." Kael's patterns shifted to violet, confidence tinged with curiosity. He tapped a Zyran pod, its surface hissing open to reveal a cluster of blooms, slender, luminous, their petals shimmering with bioluminescent swirls. "Ours breathe light," he hummed through her translator, his voice a ripple of calm. "They bend to the void, swift and wise." Lena slid an earth vial into the sequencer, a sample of desert roses, thorny survivors that clung to life in cracked soil. "Ours fight to bloom," she said. "Tough as hell. Let's see what they make together." The sequencer growled awake, its screen flashing DNA strands, Earth's rugged helix twisting into Zyran's sleek glowing spiral, merging into something jagged and alive. A robotic arm whirred, injecting the flower hybrid into a terrarium, a sealed box of dirt under harsh lights, its walls scratched with human notes. Beside it, a second arm loaded the butterfly mix, Earth's monarchs fused with Zyran flitters, into a glass enclosure etched with alien runes. Lena leaned back, arms crossed, her skepticism a familiar armor. "If they just wilt or crash, we're back to square one," she said. "Step 3, better dazzle." Kael's patterns flared blue, assurance. "They will dance," he said. "Watch." The first day was quiet, the terrarium and enclosure still under the lab's hum. Lena paced, her boots scuffing the floor, while Kael stood rooted, his glow a steady beacon. Human techs, Sanjay Patel at the fore, huddled over screens, muttering about germination rates, while Zyran's adjusted sensors with long, strong fingers, their skin flickering in unison. Ortiz prowled the edges, her scarred hands flexing, her presence a gruff reminder of Earth's impatience. The new world waited below, its barren face a silent judge. Then Patel jolted, his wiry frame trembling. "Flowers are sprouting!" he shouted, tapping his pad to project the terrarium feed overhead. Lena shoved through the crowd, Kael gliding beside her, his patterns brightening. Inside, the hybrid blooms weren't just growing, they were thriving. Stems shot up fast, Earth's thorny resilience stretched into Zyran's slenderness, their petals unfurling in a shimmer of bioluminescent swirls. Reds, blues, greens pulsing like Kael's skin. They leaned toward the lights, not wilting but reaching, their glow casting eerie shadows on the dirt. "Photosynthesis on steroids," Patel muttered, zooming in. "They're pulling energy from the light, way beyond Earth roses, and those patterns, they're shifting like they're alive." Lena squinted at the screen, her pulse quickening. The petals weren't static. Their swirls moved, slow and deliberate, like signals rippling across water. "What's that for?" she asked, pointing. "Pretty lights?" Kael bent closer, his long finger tracing a swirl on the holoscreen, his patterns pulsing violet. "Not light alone," he said. "They call. Our blooms speak to wings." Watch before Lena could press, a tech shouted, "Butterflies!" The enclosure feed flared overhead, drowning the flower image. Inside, the hybrid butterflies, Earth's monarchs fused with Zyran flitters, weren't just fluttering. They'd hatched fast, their wings unfolding in a shimmer of color, orange and black streaked with bioluminescent lines that echoed the flower's glow. They darted in patterns, their flight a dance of precision, their wings pulsing in unison like a heartbeat. They're sinking, Patel said, his pad trembling. The wings. The glow matches the flowers. It's not random. It's communication. Lena stared, her breath catching. A butterfly landed on the terrarium's edge, its wings flaring in sync with the flower's pulse, a sudden burst of blue that rippled across both. The flower leaned closer, its stem bending impossibly, its scent wafting through a vent, a sharp, sweet tang that made the butterfly's wings hum louder. Talking? She asked, her voice sharp. Plants and bugs don't talk. Not words, Kael said, his patterns flaring. Blue and violet. Signals. Your roots anchor the bloom. Our light lifts the wings. Together, they dance. The enclosure flared brighter, a cascade of butterflies swarming the terrarium's vents, their glow syncing with the flowers in a symphony of light. Zyrans hummed low, their skin mirroring the pulse, a chorus of awe. Lena's mind raced, the flowers reaching, the butterflies answering, a bond no Earth ecosystem could dream of. This wasn't just growth, it was connection, a step beyond survival into something alive and strange. Log it, she said, turning to Patel. Every pulse, every pattern, map the signals. We need to know how deep this goes. She faced Kael, her jaw tight. You said dance. What's next? Birds? Mammals? Kael's finger tapped the console, locking the data with a flicker of light. Life calls to life, he said, his voice a ripple of certainty. Next, your skies, our minds. Empires grow. The lab erupted, techs scrambling, Zyrans gliding, Ortiz muttering about damn glowing fairies. Lena stepped back, the twin glows of flowers and butterflies burning in her vision. These weren't just hybrids, they were a promise, fragile and fierce, that differences could weave something great. And the dance was just beginning. Chapter 5. Sky and Mind. The lab had morphed into a pulsing beast, its steel and glass heart now a riot of life and light. Cables hung like arteries between human terminals, clunky, overheating relics, and Zyran panels that shimmered with a soft, alien glow, their surfaces rippling under long fingers. Beyond the viewport, the new world spun silently, its dusty plains and stunted trees still barren, but its thin sky seemed to hum with possibility. Inside, the air crackled with static, soil, and the faint buzz of hybrids passed. Ants carving glyphs, bees weaving glowing hives, flowers and butterflies dancing in sync. Dr. Lena Voss stood at the central console, her headset dangling, her dark hair a tangle of exhaustion and grit. Beside her loomed Kael, his pearlescent skin casting a faint sheen, his bioluminescent patterns a steady amber, focus unbroken amid the storm. The successes stacked up like trophies along the lab's edge, the ants' terrarium glowing with hieroglyphs, the bees' hive pulsing, the flowers and butterflies shimmering in their synced dance. Each step had raised the stakes, proving Earth's resilience and Zyra's wisdom could weave something extraordinary. Lena's fingers tapped the console, pulling up the next phase. Birds and mammals, predators and thinkers, the first real leap into flesh and blood. She glanced at Kael, his big head tilted, his black eyes glinting like stars. Your flutter's dazzled, she said, her voice rough but sharp. Let's see if your skies can match ours. Kael's patterns shifted to violet, confidence edged with anticipation. He tapped a Zyran pod, its surface hissing open to reveal a bird. Sleek, wiry, its feathers shimmering with bioluminescent streaks. Ours hunt the void, he hummed through her translator, his voice a ripple of calm. Swift and wise, they pierce the dark. Lena slid an earth vial into the sequencer, a falcon, a desert screamer with razor talons, and a scream that split the wind. Ours rule the air, she said, fast and fierce. Let's blend 'em. The sequencer roared, its screen flashing DNA strands. Earth's rugged helix twisting into Zyran's luminous spiral, merging into something sharp and wild. A robotic arm whirred, injecting the bird hybrid into an aviary, a sealed dome of steel and glass under harsh lights. Beside it, a second arm loaded the monkey mix, Earth's capuchins fused with Zyran primates, into a terrarium etched with alien runes. Lena leaned back, arms crossed, her skepticism a familiar shield. If they just claw each other to bits, we're back to square one, she said. Step 4 better soar. Kael's patterns flared blue. Assurance. They will rise, he said. Watch. The first day dragged. The aviary and terrarium quiet under the lab's hum. Lena paced, her boots scuffing the floor, while Kael stood still, his glow a steady anchor. Human techs, Sanjay Patel leading, huddled over screens, muttering about hatch rates, while Zyrans adjusted sensors with long, strong fingers, their skin flickering in unison. Ortiz prowled the edges, her scarred hands flexing, her presence a gruff reminder of Earth's ticking clock. The new world waited below, its barren face a silent dare. Then Patel jolted, his wiry frame trembling. "Birds out!" he shouted, tapping his pad to project the aviary feed overhead. Lena shoved through the crowd, Kael gliding beside her, his patterns brightening. Inside, the hybrid falcon wasn't just alive. It was thriving. Its wings unfolded, Earth's broad span stretched into Zyran sleekness, feathers shimmering with pearlescent streaks that glowed blue and green. It launched skyward, a blur of speed, its talons glinting like steel. A sonic screech ripped through the dome, sharper than any Earth falcon, laced with a Zyran hum that rattled the glass. "Predator supreme," Patel muttered, zooming in. "Speed's off the charts, faster than either parent. And those feathers, look at the glow, it's hunting by light." Lena squinted at the screen, her pulse racing. The falcon dived, snatching a drone bait mid-flight with precision no Earthbird could match, its glow flaring as it struck. "What's the glow for?" she asked, pointing. "Show off?" Kael bent closer, his long finger tracing a streak on the holoscreen, his patterns pulsing violet. "Not show," he said. "Sight. Our hunters pierce the dark. Your talons anchor the kill. Together, they rule." The lab buzzed, human gasps mixing with Zyran hums. Ortiz snorted, leaning against a wall. "Great! A glowing hawk. Hope it doesn't eat us next." Before Lena could snap back, a tech shouted, "Monkeys!" The terrarium feed flared overhead, drowning the falcon's image. Inside, the hybrid monkeys, Earth's capuchins fused with Zyran primates, weren't just moving. They'd erupted from their eggs fast, their bodies a blur of motion. Earth's stocky frames stretched into Zyran thinness, fur streaked with bioluminescent lines that glowed blue and gold. They swung through branches, fast and strong, their hands crafting crude tools, sticks sharpened to spears, vines knotted into nets. "They're smart," Patel said, his pad trembling. "Look, tools, teamwork, that's beyond capuchins. And the glow. It's sinking when they move together." Lena stared, her breath catching. A monkey, smaller, wiry, shared a fruit with another, its glowing streaks flaring as it chattered, a mix of earth squeaks and Zyran hums. The troop gathered, their glow pulsing in unison, a bond that felt loving. "Communication?" she asked, her voice sharp. "They're not just smart, they're social." "Not just social," Kael said, his patterns flaring blue and violet. "Family. Your heart holds them close. Our minds lift them high. Together, they care." The terrarium flared brighter, a cascade of monkeys swinging in sync, their glow syncing with the falcon's screeches in a strange harmony. Zyrans hummed low, their skin mirroring the pulse, a chorus of awe. Lena's mind raced, the falcon ruling the sky, the monkeys weaving a troop, both fierce and alive in ways no single species could dream. This wasn't just power, it was connection, a leap beyond survival into something deep and wild. "Log it," she said, turning to Patel. Every move, every signal, map the glow, the tools. We need to know how far this goes. She faced Kael, her jaw tight. You said rise. What's next? Speed. Water. Kael's finger tapped the console, locking the data with a flicker of light. Life climbs on life, he said, his voice a ripple of certainty. Next, your runners, our swimmers. Empire's reach. The lab erupted, tech scrambling, Zyrans gliding, Ortiz muttering about damn glowing zoo. Lena stepped back, the twin glows of falcon and monkeys burning in her vision. These weren't just hybrids, they were a promise, fierce and tender, that differences could rise to greatness, and the climb was far from over. Chapter 6. Breaking Barriers. The lab was a living pulse now, its steel and glass shell straining under the weight of creation. Cables coiled like veins across the floor, linking human terminals, grumbling, overheating hulks, to Zyran panels that shimmered with a restless glow, their light dancing off walls streaked with sweat and soil. Beyond the viewport, the new world spun silently, its dusty plains and stunted trees a stubborn canvas, its thin sky tingling with unseen potential. Inside, the air crackled with static, fur, and the sharp scent of adrenaline. A cacophony of hybrids passed, ants carving empires, bees buzzing signals, flowers and butterflies dancing, falcons and monkeys ruling sky and mind. Dr. Lena Voss stood at the central console, her headset slung around her neck, her dark hair a wild snarl of exhaustion and fire. Beside her loomed Kael, his pearlescent skin casting a faint sheen, his bioluminescent patterns a steady amber, focus unshaken in the storm. The successes lined the lab like a gauntlet, the ants' glowing tunnels, the bees' pulsing hive, the flowers and butterflies in their synced shimmer, the falcons' screeches and monkeys' chattering glow. Each step had built the case, proving Earth's tenacity and Zyra's wisdom could forge something extraordinary. Lena's fingers stabbed the console, pulling up the next phase. Runners and swimmers, speed and depth, the first true test of power. She glanced at Kael, his big head tilted, his black eyes glinting like stars in a void. Your minds rose, she said, her voice rough but edged with a dare. Let's see if your runners can match ours. Kael's patterns shifted to violet, confidence-laced. With thrill, he tapped a Zyran pod, its surface hissing open to reveal a runner. Tall, wiry, its limbs shimmering with bioluminescent streaks. Ours chased the light, he hummed through her translator, his voice a ripple of calm. Swift and strong, they break the dark. Lena slid an earth vial into the sequencer, a cheetah, a blur of muscle and instinct from Earth's vanishing savannas. Ours own the ground, she said. Fast as hell. Let's smash 'em. The sequencer roared, its screen flashing DNA strands, Earth's rugged helix twisting into Zyran's luminous spiral, merging into something sleek and feral. A robotic arm whirred, injecting the cheetah hybrid into an arena, a sealed dome of steel and dirt under harsh lights. Beside it, a second arm loaded the dolphin mix, Earth's bottlenose fused with Zyran swimmers, into a tank etched with alien runes. Lena leaned back, arms crossed, her skepticism a battered shield. If they just drown or crash, we're back to square one, she said. Step 5, better break something. Kael's patterns flared blue. Certainty. They will shatter, he said. Watch. The first hours dragged, the arena and tank quiet under the lab's hum. Lena paced, her boots gouging the floor, while Kael stood still, his glow a steady rock. Human techs, Sanjay Patel at the helm, huddled over screens, muttering about muscle growth, while Zyrans adjusted sensors with long, strong fingers, their skin flickering in unison. Ortiz prowled the edges, her scarred hands flexing, her presence a growl of Earth's impatience. The new world waited below, its barren face a silent taunt. Then Patel jolted, his wiry frame shaking. Cheetahs up, he shouted, tapping his pad to project the arena feed overhead. Lena shoved through the crowd, Kael gliding beside her, his patterns brightening. Inside, the hybrid cheetah wasn't just alive, it was electric. Its body erupted from its pod. Earth's lean muscle stretched into Zyran wireness, fur streaked with pearlescent lines that glowed gold and green. It crouched, then launched, a blur of speed that smashed the sound barrier with a boom that rattled the dome, the station, the lab itself. Glass trembled, techs flinched, and a sonic wave rippled the air, its glow flaring as it streaked across the dirt. "Speed's insane," Patel stammered, zooming in. 700 to 800 miles an hour. Off the charts. And the glow, it's syncing with the run. Lena squinted at the screen, her pulse hammering. The cheetah dived, snatching a drone bait mid-blur, with claws that glinted like steel, its glow pulsing as it landed. "What's the glow for?" she asked, pointing. "Flashy?" Kyle bent closer, his long finger tracing a streak on the holoscreen, his patterns pulsing violet. "Not flash," he said. "Force. Our light drives the speed. Your muscle anchors the strike. Together, they break." The lab roared, human shouts mixing with Zyran hums. Ortiz snorted, arms crossed. "Great! A glowing rocket cat. Hope it doesn't punch a hole in the hull." Before Lena could bite back, a tech shouted, "Dolphins!" The tank feed flared overhead, drowning the cheetah's image. Inside, the hybrid dolphins, Earth's bottlenose fused with Zyran swimmers, weren't just swimming. They'd burst from their pods fast, their bodies a blur of grace, Earth's sleek curves stretched into Zyran thinness, fins shimmering with bioluminescent streaks that glowed blue and silver. They darted in patterns, leaping from the water with a hum that echoed in the lab, their eyes glinting with something aware. "They're sinking," Patel said, his pad trembling. "The hum. It's not just sound, it's thoughts, telepathic pulses, reading each other, maybe us." Lena stared, her breath catching. A dolphin leaped, its glow flaring as it locked eyes with her through the glass. A jolt hit her mind, not words but a feeling, sharp and clear. Curiosity. The tank pulsed brighter, the dolphins swimming in unison, their hums weaving a net of connection. "Telepathy?" she asked, her voice sharp. "They're not just fast, they're thinking." "Not just thought," Kael said, his patterns flaring blue and violet. "Mind. Your heart steers the bond, our depth lifts it high. Together, they reach." The tank flared again, a cascade of dolphins leaping in sync, their glow syncing with the cheetah's sonic booms in a wild harmony. Zyrans hummed low, their skin mirroring the pulse, a chorus of awe. Lena's mind raced, the cheetah shattering barriers, the dolphins weaving thoughts, both fierce and alive in ways no single species could touch. This wasn't just power, it was a breakthrough, a leap beyond limits into something vast and untamed. "Log it," she said, turning to Patel. "Every boom, every pulse, map the speed, the thoughts. We need to know how far this goes." She faced Kyle, her jaw tight. "You said shatter. What's next? Water? Trees?" Kyle's finger tapped the console, locking the data with a flicker of light. "Life breaks on life," he said, his voice a ripple of certainty. "Next, your depths, our roots. Empires spread." The lab erupted, tech scrambling, Zyrans gliding, Ortiz muttering about damn psychic fish. Lena stepped back, the twin roars of cheetah and dolphin burning in her vision. These weren't just hybrids, they were a revolution, fierce and boundless, that differences could shatter greatness wide open, and the spread was just beginning. Chapter 7. The Living Web. The station's lab had reached its breaking point, a throbbing nexus of steel and glass stretched thin by weeks of relentless creation. Cables sagged like overburdened vines, stitching human terminals, grumbling, patched relics, to Zyran panels that shimmered with a restless, alien glow, their light spilling across walls scarred with dirt and claw marks. Beyond the viewport, the new world loomed larger now, its dusty plains and stunted trees, no longer a distant speck, but a canvas pulled close, its thin sky trembling with untapped life. Inside, the air crackled with static, salt, and the sharp tang of sap. A symphony of hybrids passed. Ants glowing empires, bees buzzing hives, flowers and butterflies dancing, falcons and monkeys ruling, cheetahs and dolphins shattering barriers. Dr. Lena Voss stood at the central console, her headset dangling, her dark hair a wild snarl of grit and sleepless fire. Beside her loomed Kael, his pearlescent skin casting a faint sheen, his bioluminescent patterns a steady amber, focus unshaken in the chaos. The hybrids lined the lab like a living arsenal, the ants' terrarium pulsing with hieroglyphs, the bees' hive humming, the flowers and butterflies in their synced glow, the falcons' screeches and monkeys' chattering tools, the cheetahs' sonic blur and dolphins' telepathic leaps. Each step had built a case, proving Earth's tenacity and Zyra's wisdom could forge something extraordinary. Now it was time to let them loose. Lena's fingers stabbed the console, pulling up the final phase fish, coral, trees, and the gap fillers to weave a full circle of life. She glanced at Kael, his big head tilted, his black eyes glinting like stars in a storm. "Your swimmers broke barriers," she said, her voice rough but alive. "Let's see if your depths can match ours." Kael's patterns shifted to violet, confidence edged with purpose. He tapped a Zyran pod, its surface hissing. Open to reveal a swimmer, sleek, wiry, its scales shimmering with bioluminescent streaks. "Ours thread the void," he hummed through her translator, his voice a ripple of calm. "Strong and deep, they bind the dark." Lena slid an earth vial into the sequencer, a barracuda, a razor-toothed predator from Earth's fading seas. "Ours cut the water," she said. "Fierce as hell, let's meld 'em." The sequencer roared, its screen flashing DNA strands, Earth's rugged helix twisting into Zyron's luminous spiral, merging into something sharp and fluid. A robotic arm whirred, injecting the fish hybrid into a tank, a sealed dome of water under harsh lights. Beside it, a second arm loaded the coral tree mix, Earth's oaks fused with Zyran coral, into a terrarium etched with alien runes. A third pod held gap fillers, herbivores, scavengers, microbes, to round out the web. Lena leaned back, arms crossed, her skepticism battered but holding. "If they just sink or rot, we've got nothing," she said. Step 6, better live. Kael's patterns flared blue. Certainty. "They will weave," he said. "Watch." The first day was tense, the tank and terrarium quiet under the lab's hum. Lena paced, her boots gouging the floor, while Kael stood still, his glow a steady anchor. Human techs, Sanjay Patel at the helm, huddled over screens, muttering about cell division, while Zyrans adjusted sensors with long, strong fingers, their skin flickering in unison. Ortiz prowled the edges, her scarred hands flexing, her presence a growl of Earth's urgency. The new world waited below, its barren face a silent call. Then Patel jolted, his wiry frame shaking. "Fish are moving!" he shouted, tapping his pad to project the tank feed overhead. Lena shoved through the crowd, Kael gliding beside her, his patterns brightening. Inside, the hybrid barracudas weren't just swimming, they were thriving. Their bodies darted, Earth's muscled frames stretched into Zyran wiriness, scales shimmering with pearlescent streaks that glowed silver and green. They sliced the water, fast and fierce, their jaws snapping with a force that cracked a test drone in half, their glow pulsing as they hunted. "Predators on fire!" Patel stammered, zooming in. "Speeds double Earth's, jaws stronger too. And the glow, it's syncing with their strikes." Lena squinted at the screen, her pulse racing. A barracuda lunged, its glow flaring as it shredded another drone, its scales rippling like Kael's. "Skin. What's the glow for?" she asked, pointing. "Hunting." Kael bent closer, his long finger tracing a streak on the holoscreen, his patterns pulsing violet. "Not just hunt," he said. "Bind. Our depth threads the web. Your teeth anchor the kill. Together, they hold." The lab buzzed, human shouts mixing with Zyran hums. Ortiz snorted, arms crossed. "Great, glowing piranhas. Hope they don't eat the ship." Before Lena could snap back, a tech shouted, "Coral trees!" The terrarium feed flared overhead, drowning the fish image. Inside, the hybrid coral trees weren't just growing, they were spreading. Roots sank deep. Earth's oak resilience stretched into Zyran coral thinness, branches shimmering with bioluminescent swirls that glowed blue and gold. They sprouted fast, their glow pulsing across the dirt, their roots threading water and air into a living net. "They're filtering," Patel said, his pad trembling. "Air, water, cleaner than anything natural. And the glow. It's syncing with the fish." Lena stared, her breath catching. A barracuda darted past the terrarium's edge, its glow flaring as a coral tree branch pulsed in response. A sudden burst of green that rippled across both. The tree leaned closer, its roots humming faintly, a bond that felt alive. "Communication?" she asked, her voice sharp. "They're not just growing. They're linked?" "Not just linked," Kael said, his patterns flaring blue and violet. "Web, your roots anchor the ground. Our light lifts the deep. Together, they live." The tank and terrarium flared brighter, a cascade of barracudas and coral trees sinking in a pulse of light. Zyrans hummed low, their skin mirroring the glow, a chorus of awe. Lena's mind raced, the fish binding the water, the coral trees threading the land, a web no single species could weave. But it wasn't enough. The new world needed more. "Release them," she said, turning to Kael. "All of them. Ants, bees, flowers, butterflies, falcons, monkeys, cheetahs, dolphins. These. The ark's ready, right?" Kyle's patterns flared green. Agreement. He gestured to a Zyran tech, who activated a bay door. Beyond it loomed the ark ship, a massive Zyran vessel, its hull shimmering like their skin, its bays packed with hybrids and gap fillers. The station shuddered as it docked, a low rumble shaking the floor. The lab crew scrambled, techs hauling pods, Zyrans guiding drones, until the ark's bays opened, spilling life onto the new world. Below, the viewport flared, ants burrowed, bees swarmed, flowers bloomed, butterflies danced, falcons soared, monkeys chattered, cheetahs streaked, dolphins leaped, barracudas darted, coral trees sprouted. The barren plains erupted, a glowing web spreading fast, its pulse echoing back to the station. Lena pressed against the glass, her breath fogging it, the sight burning into her soul. "They're alive," she whispered, turning to Kael. "What's next? Us." Kael's finger tapped the console, locking the data with a flicker of light. "Life roots in life," he said, his voice a ripple of certainty. "Next, our peak. Empires bloom." The lab roared, techs cheering, Zyrans humming, Ortiz muttering about damn glowing jungle. Lena stepped back, the web's glow searing her vision. These weren't just hybrids. They were a world, fierce and boundless, that differences could weave into greatness. And the peak was coming. Chapter 8. The Teletrons Rise. The station's lab had quieted, its steel and glass shell exhaling after weeks of relentless birth. Cables hung slack across the floor, human terminals, scarred, silent relics, dim beside Zyran panels that pulsed with a faint, tired glow, their light fading on walls etched with claw marks and sap. Beyond the viewport, the new world thrummed, its dusty plains now a glowing tapestry of hybrids, its stunted trees dwarfed by coral trees, its thin sky alive with falcons and butterflies. Inside, the air hung heavy with salt, soil, and a strange calm. The echoes of hybrids past. Ants' empires, bees' hives, flowers' dances, falcons' screeches, monkeys' tools, cheetahs' booms, dolphins' thoughts, barracudas' hunts, fading into memory. Dr. Lena Voss stood at the central console, her headset dangling, her dark hair a wild snarl of exhaustion and awe. Beside her loomed Kael, his pearlescent skin shimmering, his bioluminescent patterns a steady amber, focus unbroken even now. The ark had done its work. The new world below pulsed with life. Ants burrowed, bees swarmed, flowers bloomed, butterflies danced, falcons soared, monkeys chattered, cheetahs streaked, dolphins leaped, barracudas darted, coral trees spread, a web woven from Earth's grit and Zyra's glow. Each step had built to this, proving their differences could forge something extraordinary. Now, the final phase loomed. Not just life, but its pinnacle. Lena's fingers brushed the console, pulling up the blueprint. Human and Zyran. DNA. The ultimate merge. She glanced at Kael, his big head tilted, his black eyes glinting like stars in a void. "Your web's alive," she said, her voice rough but steady. "Let's see if your peak can match ours." Kael's patterns shifted to violet, confidence laced with reverence. He tapped a Zyran pod, its surface hissing open to reveal a shimmering vial. Zyran essence, glowing with bioluminescent threads. "Ours lift the void," he hummed through her translator, his voice a ripple of calm. "Wise and strong, they bridge the dark." Lena slid an earth vial into the sequencer. Human cells, raw and rugged, scraped from her own team's blood. "Ours fight to stand," she said. "Tough as hell. Let's crown it." The sequencer roared, its screen flashing DNA strands, Earth's blocky helix twisting into Zyran's luminous spiral, merging into something sleek and radiant. But this wasn't for the lab. The station trembled as a Zyran mothership docked, a towering vessel of pearlescent alloy, its hull pulsing like their skin, its labs primed for the ultimate birth. Lena and Kael led the team aboard, the air shifting to a sterile hum, the walls glowing with runes. A central chamber opened, vats of swirling light, gene sequencers humming, a cradle for the Teletrons. "We're not testing this time," Lena said, her arms crossed, her skepticism a fading shield. "This is it, our peak. If it flops, we've got a glowing mess." Kael's patterns flared blue, certainty absolute. "They will rise," he said. "Watch." The first hour stretched, the mothership's chamber a quiet storm. Lena paced, her boots echoing on the alloy floor, while Kael stood still, his glow a steady rock. Human techs, Sanjay Patel at the fore, huddled over screens, muttering about cell fusion, while Zyrons adjusted vats with long, strong fingers, their skin flickering in unison. Ortiz prowled the edges, her scarred hands flexing, her presence a gruff anchor to Earth's stakes. The new world glowed below, its web a silent call. Then Patel jolted, his wiry frame trembling. "They're forming!" he shouted, tapping his pad to project the vat feed overhead. Lena shoved through the crowd, Kael gliding beside her, his patterns brightening. Inside, the Teletrons weren't just growing, they were emerging. Their bodies took shape, tall like Zyrans, muscled like humans, skin pearlescent white, with bioluminescent patterns swirling gold and blue. Their heads were large, eyes black and deep, limbs long and strong. They floated in the vats, serene and fierce, their glow pulsing like a heartbeat. "They're perfect," Patel stammered, zooming in. "Strength, speed, beyond either of us. And the glow. It's alive, shifting with thought." Lena squinted at the screen, her pulse racing. A Teletron's eyes opened, locking on her through the glass. A jolt hit her mind. Not words, but a voice, clear and vast. "We see." The vat flared, its light syncing with the others, a cascade of awakening. "Telepathy?" she asked, her voice sharp. "They're already in our heads?" Kael bent closer, his long finger tracing a pattern on the holoscreen, his patterns pulsing violet. "Not just thought," he said. "Power. Your heart anchors, our mind lifts. Together, they bridge." The chamber roared, human gasps mixing with Zyran hums. Ortiz snorted, arms crossed. Great, glowing mind readers. Hope they don't judge us too hard. Before Lena could snap back, the vats hissed open. The Teletrons stepped out, 5 of them, towering and radiant, their glow flaring as they moved. One raised a hand, and a console lifted off the floor, hovering in midair. Telekinesis. Another vanished in a flash, reappearing across the room. Teleportation. A third touched a cracked wall, its glow healing the metal shut. The lab trembled, the air thick with their presence, their voices humming in every mind. We are your thanks. They're everything, Lena breathed, stepping closer, her awe breaking through. Telepathy, telekinesis, teleportation, healing. What can't they do? Kael's patterns flared blue and violet, a tide of pride. Not everything, he said. Us. Your fire, our light. Together, they peak. The Teletrons turned, their glow sinking in a pulse that shook the mothership. Then, in a flash of light, they vanished, teleporting down to the new world below. The viewport flared, 5 figures shimmering on the glowing plains, their patterns pulsing across the web of hybrids. Zyrans hummed low, their skin mirroring the glow, a chorus of reverence. Lena pressed against the glass, her breath fogging it, the sight searing into her soul. They're down there, she said, turning to Kael. What now? Guardians? Kael's finger tapped the console, locking the data with a flicker of light. Life peaks in life, he said, his voice a ripple of certainty. They will guard. Empires rise. The chamber buzzed, techs scrambling, Zyrans gliding, Ortiz muttering about, damn, glowing gods. Lena stepped back, the Teletron's glow burning in her vision. These weren't just hybrids, they were the peak, fierce and boundless, that differences could rise to greatness. And the rise was just the start. Chapter 9. Guardian's Pledge. The mothership hovered in a silent orbit, its pearlescent hull a glowing sentinel above the new world. Inside, the lab chamber had stilled, its vats empty, its walls etched with the faint hum of spent creation. Cables lay coiled but dormant, human terminals, scarred, quiet relics, dim beside Zyran panels that pulsed with a soft, fading glow, their light catching on glass streaked with salt and soil. Beyond the viewport, the new world blazed, its dusty plains now a radiant web of hybrids, its stunted trees dwarfed by coral trees, its thin sky alive with falcons, butterflies, and sonic cheetahs streaking below. Inside, the air hung thick with awe and exhaustion, the echoes of hybrids past, ants' empires, bees' hives, flowers' dances, falcons' screeches, monkeys' tools, cheetahs' booms, dolphins' thoughts, barracudas' hunts, settling into a reverent hush. Dr. Lena Voss stood at the viewport, her headset dangling, her dark hair a wild tangle of grit and wonder. Beside her loomed Kael, his pearlescent skin shimmering, his bioluminescent patterns a steady amber, focus unshaken even now. The Teletrons had descended hours ago, their teleport flash still burning in Lena's vision. 5 towering figures, pearlescent and radiant, their patterns swirling gold and blue as they landed on the glowing plains. The new world had erupted in response. Ants burrowed deeper, bees swarmed tighter, flowers pulsed brighter, butterflies danced faster, falcons soared higher, monkeys chattered louder, cheetahs streaked faster, dolphins leaped sharper, barracudas darted fiercer, coral trees spread wider. Each hybrid had woven a web, proving Earth's tenacity and Zyra's wisdom could forge something extraordinary. Now the Teletrons stood as its crown. Lena's fingers brushed the console, pulling up their feed, live scans from drones orbiting the planet below. She glanced at Kael, his big head tilted, his black eyes glinting like stars in a storm. Your peaks down there, she said, her voice rough but warm. Let's see if they match the hype. Kael's patterns shifted to violet, confidence laced with pride. He tapped a Zyran pad, its surface flaring with a holofeed. Teletrons, moving across the web, their glow pulsing with purpose. Ours guard the void, he hummed through her translator, his voice a ripple of calm. Wise and strong, they mend the dark. Lena leaned closer, her breath fogging the glass. The feed showed a teletron, tall, muscled, its skin pearlescent like Zyran's, its patterns alive with human fire, kneeling beside a wounded butterfly. Its wing was torn, a fragile shimmer dulled by dust. The teletron's hand hovered, glowing with bioluminescent streaks, and the wing knit shut, its glow flaring back to life. Healing, she said, her voice sharp with awe. They're not just strong, they're fixing it. The lab stirred, human techs crowding the console, Zyrans gliding closer, their skin flickering in unison. Sanjay Patel tapped his pad, zooming the feed. Look, telekinesis too, he said, his wiry frame trembling. Another teletron floated above the plains, its long limbs outstretched, lifting a fallen coral tree with a thought. Its roots sank back into the dirt, its glow pulsing brighter as it took hold. They're guardians, Lena breathed, her eyes locked on the screen. A third teletron teleported in a flash, appearing beside a storm, dark clouds swirling over the web. It raised a hand, its glow flaring gold, and the storm calmed, its winds easing into a breeze. Telepathy, telekinesis, teleportation, healing, they're everything we made. Kael bent closer, his long finger tracing a pattern on the holofeed, his patterns pulsing violet and blue. Not everything, he said. Us. Your heart mends, our mind shapes. Together, they pledge. The feed flared, teletrons moving in sync, their voices humming in every mind aboard the mothership. We are your thanks. We guard this world, its web, its life. The words weren't spoken, but felt. Sharp, clear, a vow that shook the lab. Ortiz, leaning against a wall, snorted softly. Great, glowing babysitters. Hope they don't bill us. Lena ignored her, her pulse racing. The feed shifted. A teletron approached a monkey troop, their bioluminescent streaks dim from a scuffle. It knelt, its hand glowing, and the monkey's fur flared back to life, their chattering softening into a hum of trust. They're not just guarding, she said, turning to Kael. They're bonding, making it better. Kael's patterns flared green. Agreement. Not just better, he said. More. The feed zoomed out, showing all 5 teletrons gathered on a glowing hill, their patterns, pulsing in unison. Their voices hummed again. We are the peak, but the web can grow. Your roots, our light. Let us weave more. A hollow image flared in their hands. Ants with sharper claws. Butterflies with stealthier wings. Hybrids tweaked with fresh traits. Diversity? Lena asked, her voice sharp. They're not changing themselves. They're enhancing the rest. Kael's patterns shifted to violet and gold, a tide of purpose. They stand as peak, he said, but life thrives in layers. Your strength anchors, our wisdom lifts. Together, they deepen. The lab buzzed, techs scrambling to log the proposal, Zyrans humming low, their skin sinking with the teletron's glow. Patel muttered, Endurance ants, camouflage butterflies, it's doable. Their sequencers could tweak the lower tiers fast. Lena pressed against the viewport, her breath fogging it again. Below, a teletron levitated over a coral tree, its glow healing a cracked branch as monkeys chattered beneath, their streaks pulsing in harmony. The web shimmered. Ants, bees, flowers, butterflies, falcons, monkeys, cheetahs, dolphins, barracudas, coral trees, all alive, all linked, all guarded. They're pledging, she said, her voice low but firm, not just to protect, to grow it. Kael's finger tapped the console, locking the feed with a flicker of light. Life guards life, he said, his voice a ripple of certainty. They will call when ready. Empires deepen. The chamber stirred. Techs cheering, Zyrans gliding, Ortiz muttering about damn glowing gardeners. Lena stepped back, the Teletrons' glow searing her vision. These weren't just hybrids. They were guardians, fierce and boundless, that differences could pledge to greatness. And the call was yet to come. Chapter 10. The call beyond the mothership hung in a quiet orbit, its pearlescent hull a glowing relic above the new world, its engines humming soft as a lullaby. Inside, the lab chamber had emptied, its vats cold, its walls etched with the faint scars of creation. Claw marks, sap stains, the ghosts of 1,000 hybrids. Cables lay coiled and still, human terminals, scarred, powered down, silent beside Zyran panels that pulsed with a dim, resting glow, their light fading on glass, streaked with salt and soil. Beyond the viewport, the new world blazed, a radiant tapestry of life, its dusty plains now a glowing jungle of coral trees, its thin sky alive with falcons, butterflies, and sonic cheetahs streaking. Below, dolphins leaping in shimmering seas. Inside, the air hung thick with awe, exhaustion, and a strange peace. The echoes of hybrids past, ants' empires, bees' hives, flowers' dances, falcons' screeches, monkeys' tools, cheetahs' booms, dolphins' thoughts, barracudas' hunts, teletrons' rise, settling into a final, reverent hush. Dr. Lena Voss stood at the viewport, her headset dangling, her dark hair a wild tangle of grit and wonder, her hands pressed against the glass. Beside her loomed Kael, his pearlescent skin shimmering, his bioluminescent patterns a steady amber, focus unshaken, even at the end. The Teletrons had taken root below, their glowing figures a constant pulse across the web. 5 guardians, pearlescent and radiant, their patterns swirling gold and blue as they moved through the hybrids they'd sworn to protect. The new world had answered. Ants burrowed deeper with sharper claws. Bees swarmed tighter with glowing hives. Flowers pulsed brighter with stealthier butterflies. Falcons soared higher. Monkeys chattered louder with smarter tools. Cheetahs streaked faster. Dolphins leaped sharper with telepathic bonds. Barracudas darted fiercer. Coral trees spread wider, filtering air and water into a thriving pulse. Each hybrid had woven a web, proving Earth's tenacity and Zyra's wisdom could forge something extraordinary. Now the Teletrons stood as its heart, their pledge to guard and deepen it echoing in every mind aboard the mothership. Lena's fingers brushed the console, pulling up their final feed, live scans from drones orbiting the planet below. She glanced at Kael, his big head tilted, his black eyes glinting like stars in a calm sea. "Your guardians are holding," she said, her voice rough but warm. "Let's see if they send us off right." Kael's patterns shifted to violet, confidence laced with farewell. He tapped a Zyran pad, its surface flaring with a holofeed. Teletrons gathered on a glowing hill, their glow pulsing with purpose. "Ours call beyond the void," he hummed through her translator, his voice a ripple of calm. "Wise and strong, they bridge the stars." Lena leaned closer, her breath fogging the glass. The feed showed a Teletron, tall, muscled, its skin pearlescent like Zyran's, its patterns alive with human fire. Levitating above the hill, its long limbs outstretched. Below, the web shimmered, ants carving tunnels, bees weaving hives, flowers and butterflies dancing, falcons and monkeys ruling, cheetahs and dolphins breaking barriers, barracudas and coral trees binding it all. The Teletron's voice hummed in their minds. "We thank you. We guard this world, its web, its life. Go now. When it is ready, we will call." The lab stirred. Human techs crowding the console, Zyrans gliding closer, their skin flickering in unison. Sanjay Patel tapped his pad, zooming the feed. "Look, they're stable," he said, his wiry frame trembling with awe. "The web's thriving. Air's cleaner, water's clearer. They're not just guarding, they're perfecting it." "They're us," Lena breathed, her eyes locked on the screen. Another Teletron teleported beside a coral tree, its glow healing a cracked branch as monkeys chattered beneath, their streaks pulsing in harmony. A third lifted a fallen falcon with a thought, its wings flaring back to life. Telepathy, telekinesis, teleportation, healing. They're everything we dreamed. Kael bent closer, his long finger tracing a pattern on the holofeed, his patterns pulsing violet and gold. Not everything, he said. You. Your heart forged this. Our mind shaped it. Together they call. The feed flared. Teletrons moving in sync, their voices humming again. We are the peak, but the call grows. When the web is set, we will send ours. Your worlds will know this light. A hollow image flared in their hands. Hybrid ambassadors, glowing with Zyran patterns, poised to bridge Earth and Zyra someday. Ambassadors? Lena asked, her voice sharp with wonder. They're not stopping. They're reaching out. Kael's patterns flared green. Agreement. They stand as peak, he said, but life spreads in layers. Your strength roots, our wisdom lifts. Together, they reach. The lab buzzed. Techs scrambling to log the vow. Zyrans humming low, their skin sinking with the Teletron's glow. Patel muttered, they could tweak more. Send hybrids with healing, speed. It's galactic. Lena pressed against the viewport, her breath fogging it again. Below, a Teletron floated over a sonic cheetah, its glow pulsing as the cheetah streaked past, a blur of gold and green. The web shimmered. Ants, bees, flowers, butterflies, falcons, monkeys, cheetahs, dolphins, barracudas, coral trees. All alive, all linked, all guarded. They're promising, she said, her voice low but firm. Not just to guard, to share it. Kael's finger tapped the console, locking the feed with a flicker of light. Life calls to life, he said, his voice a ripple of certainty. They will call when ready. Empires spread. The chamber shifted. Techs packing gear, Zyrans gliding to their stations, Ortiz slinging a bag over her shoulder. Glowing pen pals, she muttered, a rare grin cracking her scarred face. Better not spam us. Lena smirked, then turned to Kael. We're leaving, she said, her tone steady but heavy. Earth needs us, Zyra too. But this, it's theirs now. Kael's patterns flared blue and violet, a tide of farewell. Ours, he corrected. Your fire, my light. They hold it. We go, but we return. The mothership rumbled, its engines flaring as it pulled from orbit. The station followed, a silver shard trailing behind, both vessels turning from the new world. Lena lingered at the viewport, her hands pressed to the glass, the Teletron's glow fading as the planet shrank. One stood atop the hill, its patterns pulsing a final hum. We will call. The web blazed beneath. Ants, bees, flowers, butterflies, falcons, monkeys, cheetahs, dolphins, barracudas, coral trees. A world alive, fierce, and boundless. A testament that differences could spread greatness beyond the stars. The chamber quieted. Tech stowing pads, Zyrans dimming panels, Ortiz slumping into a seat. Lena stepped back, the glow searing her vision, her heart thudding with a strange, fierce hope. This wasn't just an end. It was a beginning, a call yet to come. Epilogue. Echoes of the Merge. The sky over New Cairo was a bruised purple, its smog thinning for the first time in decades, a faint breeze carrying the scent of reclaimed soil. Dr. Lena Voss stood on the edge of a rooftop garden, her dark hair streaked with gray, her hands scarred but steady as she gripped a railing. Below, the city hummed, drones buzzing, children laughing in sealed domes now cracked open to test the air. Earth wasn't healed, not yet, but it was breathing, its lungs patched by tech scavenged from the merge. She adjusted her headset, its crackle a familiar friend, and stared at the horizon. The stars glittered sharper tonight, and one pulsed brighter, a beacon she'd never forgotten. Across the galaxy, Zyra shimmered under a twin sunset, its oceans lapping at shores once cracked and dry. Kael stood on a cliff of pearlescent stone, his tall, skinny frame unchanged, his skin glowing with bioluminescent patterns. Amber now, steady as ever. The seas below pulsed with life, coral hybrids spreading, their glow threading. The water with light. His big head tilted, black eyes glinting as he traced the sky. The same star flared, a signal rippling through the void, and his patterns shifted to violet. Confidence, memory, pride. Years had passed since the mothership pulled away, since the Teletrons' glow faded into the new world's web. Lena had returned to Earth, her voice hoarse from briefing generals, her hands raw from building filters based on coral tree designs. Kael had gone to Zyra, his wisdom shaping pumps that pulled water from deep crust, his strength bending their tech to match the hybrid's grace. Both worlds had clawed forward, Earth's air thinning, Zyra's seas rising, each step a shadow of the merge they'd left behind. But the new world, that glowing jewel they'd forged, had never dimmed. Drones sent back feeds, ants with sharper claws burrowing empires, bees with glowing hives buzzing signals, flowers and stealth butterflies dancing, falcons and smart monkeys ruling, sonic cheetahs and telepathic dolphins breaking barriers, fierce barracudas and coral trees weaving a web that pulsed with life. The Teletrons stood at its heart, their pearlescent figures guarding, healing, deepening, a legacy of Earth's grit and Zyra's light. Tonight, that legacy called. Lena's headset crackled, a signal cutting through static, a hum, sharp and clear, echoing the Teletron's voice. "We are ready," it said. Not words, but a feeling, vast and alive. She tapped her pad, pulling up a feed. Earth's orbit flared, a Zyran ship shimmering into view, its hull pulsing like Kael's skin. On Zyra, Kael's pad flared too, the same ship mirrored in his sky, its glow syncing with his patterns. The call had come. The ship descended over New Cairo, its bay doors hissing open, and a figure stepped out. Tall, pearlescent, its skin swirling with bioluminescent streaks of gold and green. It wasn't a Teletron, not quite. Smaller, leaner, its eyes black but softer, its glow a blend of human fire and Zyran grace. An ambassador. Lena's breath caught as it approached, its voice humming in her mind. "I am yours, sent to mend." It knelt beside a child coughing in the street, its hand glowing, and the cough eased, the lungs clearing with a shimmer of light. On Zyra, another ship landed, its ambassador mirroring Kael's glow, violet and blue pulsing across its skin. It glided to the shore, its hand hovering over a cracked reef, and the coral flared back to life, its glow, threading the water with healing. Kael's patterns flared green, agreement, awe, as the ambassador's voice hummed, "I am ours, sent to lift." The sea pulsed brighter, a ripple of life spreading wide. Lena stepped closer, her boots scuffing the rooftop dirt, her eyes locked on the ambassador. "You're from them," she said, her voice rough but steady. "The Teletron sent you." The ambassador's patterns flared gold, its mind brushing hers. "We are their gift. The web thrives. Your roots, our light. We bring it back." A hollow image flared in its hand, ants with healing claws, butterflies with telepathic wings, a new wave of hybrids poised to spread. "For Earth?" she asked, her pulse racing. For all, it hummed. "Your worlds birthed us. We mend them now." On Zyra, Kael traced the ambassador's glow, his long finger steady. "For Zyra?" he asked, his voice a ripple through his translator. "For all," it echoed, its patterns syncing with his. The call spreads. Your strength, our wisdom. Together, we grow. Lena's headset crackled again, a faint hum bridging the stars. Kael's voice, telepathic through the ambassador's link. "Lena," he said, his ripple warm in her mind. "They are us." She smirked, her scarred hand flexing. "Kael!" she shot back, her fire sharp. "We did good." Their minds touched, a flicker of grit and glow, a nod across the galaxy. Below, the ambassador in New Cairo healed another lung, its glow pulsing as children laughed freer. On Zyra, the ambassador lifted a tide, its light threading the sea with life. The new world burned bright in their thoughts, Teletrons guarding a web of ants, bees, flowers, butterflies, falcons, monkeys, cheetahs, dolphins, barracudas, coral trees, a world alive and fierce, its call now echoing beyond. Lena stepped back, her hands dropping from the railing, the stars blazing above. The ambassador's glow lingered, a promise of more. Earth's air clearing, Zyra's seas rising, hybrids spreading their light. Kael turned from his cliff, his patterns fading to amber, the ambassador's hum a steady pulse. The merge wasn't just a world, it was a bridge, a legacy that differences could mend, lift, and spread greatness across the stars. The ships flared once more, then vanished. Ambassadors at work, their call begun. Lena and Kael stood apart, galaxies between them, but bound by the glow they'd forged, a fire and light that would never dim. The end. Created by Sam Jaggard and Grok. Thanks for listening.